BP to mobilize additional equipment and technology. And in the coming weeks and days, these efforts should capture up to 90% of the oil leaking out of the well. This is until the company finishes drilling a relief well later in the summer that's expected to stop the leak completely.
President Obama making his first Oval Office address since taking office, trying to convince the nation he's on top of the situation and in control. The next day, Mr. Obama met with BP CEO Tony Hayward after weeks of pressure from the press to do so. I want to go over, Bill, some of the media reaction to Mr. Obama's speech. Running on empty, says Mother Jones magazine. Obama, B-O-M-B-A, from the Philadelphia Daily News. And from Salon.com, just words, Obama's Oval Office speech fizzles. Even at MSNBC, the thrill up the leg is gone, it seems.
Chris Matthews said that he would, quote-unquote, barf if Obama mentioned one more time that his energy secretary, who's working on this problem, has a Nobel Prize. That's even wearing a little thin. I think the takeaway, John, is that this is finally the point where both the left and the right now agree that Obama has had a lackluster performance, to say the least, when it comes to responding to this oil spill. And I think there's this growing realization that Obama just isn't going to have a bullhorn moment. Remember that bullhorn moment when President Bush stood in the rubble 3 days after 9/11, said, "I can hear you," it electrified the nation. His ratings, approval ratings went to 90%. Obama's are less than half that right now, and they're falling because people feel that he's helpless to stop this thing.
Let's get your take on that, Ellis. You're from the Gulf Coast. Do you agree?
That is right. Well, I mean, he is helpless to stop it. I mean, you have to count on BP. The bad news for Obama is that the tone has been lackluster, including in the speech. The good news is that when we feel frustrated with him, there are far worse things from other players in that. You've got a Republican congressman apologizing to the head of BP. You've got the company saying another series of stupid stuff. So the good news from the White House point of view is let the others keep talking.
There was another moment this week where the president invoked 9/11 to compare to the Gulf oil spill. He said to Politico, in the same way that our view of our vulnerabilities in our foreign policy was shaped profoundly by 9/11, I think this disaster is going to shape how we think about the environment and energy for many years to come. Did the media buy into that comparison?
No, I think many commentators, John, were extremely critical of Mr. Obama for wrapping himself in full metal jacket, for using those military metaphors in order to look tough. It didn't fly. It didn't play well. No one is convinced.
Is that what you get, Jim, when you hire a 27-year-old speechwriter, chief speechwriter?
A 27-year-old who's had several YouTube-worthy moments, if anybody's curious about, him, what he thinks of Hillary Clinton or playing beer pong with his friends. I mean, yeah, it is. There's much to be said for having Ted Sorensen or Arthur Schlesinger as opposed to this kid writing speeches. What was most interesting to me and speaking of the speech, was what Dan Frumkin of the Huffington Post said, who was a fan, basically, of Obama, as is the entire Huffington Post, said the most depressing thing about this speech to him was that the Obamans really believed internally that it would change everything. They called it an inflection point. They said it'll change everything. And in fact, as Frumkin said, it didn't change a thing.
As Obama has done so often, he builds up his own expectations so high as to be unrealistic, and you can inevitably only fail to deliver then. I think that as for this congressman that said that they got in all kinds of trouble because he said that the White House had done a shakedown of BP. Well, yeah, everybody's going crazy ripping on this guy, but, the New York Times had a front page story talking about the raw arm twisting of Obama and the governmental overreach of Obama, and they dress it up in this intellectual sort of highfalutin prose and sort of examine it as a power grab, and nobody bats an eye. But when some hapless congressman inelegantly phrases this, everybody goes nuts, including his fellow Republicans.
He recanted his own apology.
I'm not defending what I'm saying. I'm talking about the hypocrisy and the double standard.
And one of the biggest hits on the Obama administration is that they've been too cozy with BP and too agreeable with BP. My goodness, this is the most powerful person in Congress on energy issues for the Republicans, and he makes the Obama people look like they're swinging baseball bats at Hayward's
head. It was
interesting.
In a media news cycle environment, it took about 2 hours before Boehner, Cantor, Pence all denounced the guy, Congressman Barton, and they said they'll strip him of his ranking membership. I mean, the damage control the Republicans did on this was I think from a technique point of view, excellent.
Yeah, but it's still out there. We're
yeah,
still
but that's
talking
because
about
Not
Obama's...
anymore. No, it's gone.
It's out there.
No, Obama's rescued time and time again by the fact that the Republicans do not have a coherent message. That's what saves Obama from the worst speech he's given so far.
Yeah, but you know, there's an eagerness. There's an eagerness on the part of the press because they don't like to blame Obama, and they're sort of tired of beating up on BP. How much more percentage is there in that? To see a Republican who can be the villain, and there was this sort of over-eagerness, this, aha, some Republican said something dumb, let's make him the villain.
Plenty of villains here. I mean, it seems like there's nobody like. A Rasmussen poll, Ellis, asked, when they, the media, write or talk about President Barack Obama, what are reporters trying to do? According to the results, 48% think most reporters are trying to help the president pass his agenda. 27% say most reporters are interested in reporting the news in an unbiased manner. What do you think of those stats?
Well, I mean, I don't know those numbers are so different from what we've seen for a long time. But let's remember, one of the things that this last week does is that it undermines the argument going forward that outfits like MSNBC and Salon and some of the places that you guys love to bash, you know what? They slam that guy so hard. You can't claim any of those folks are in the tank anymore the way you were able to in the past.
Did I hear you right saying this is like nothing new? Because I don't remember the media trying to help the Bush administration pass its agenda.
Yeah, but clearly, notice the rhetoric in the last week from the so-called horrific liberal media. I mean, they're not in the tank anymore,
There's an element to which they're playing for the left as opposed to the Obama administration. And I think that Obama is deviating from the left. And Walter Shapiro, who's a terrific guy, had a column where he said Obama should be more like Jimmy Carter, and he meant it.
Sure, and let's understand, though, that Obama was never quite the extreme leftist that some folks were warning about.
And that's why we knew he'd break hearts.